Welcome to Morning Java, brought to you by GetGo Cafe and Market, where this month you can get the cheesesteak on special.
Yes, and the cheesesteaks, I've tried it, Dale. They're decent. You know, I was out near Philadelphia, not in it. I was at Cheney University, but I've had some Philly cheesesteaks, so I know what good cheesesteaks are, man. Take my word for it. And this one is definitely worth a shot. But, Dale, let's skip all the nonsense. Let's get to what the big deal was. Mike Tomlin's press conference. That's what everyone's talking about. And almost exclusively, it was about Antonio Brown.
Almost exclusively, and there was a lot of ground to cover there. Obviously, Mike Tomlin took us through the week last week, everything that happened. The bottom line was that Antonio Brown was scheduled for an MRI on Friday and went AWOL after that, and has not talked to he came to the stadium on Sunday. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, called the Steelers Sunday morning after Antonio Brown did not return phone calls from Mike Tomlin or Art Rooney on Saturday or Friday night. And his agent calls Sunday morning, says, Antonio's ready to play. And Mike Tomlin said, no, he's not. He's not going to play in this game. Antonio Brown shows up at the stadium and then leaves before the game is over. He and Mike Tomlin had a brief conversation on that day, but they have not spoken since.
Yeah, what does all that say to you? Because I've never heard of an agent calling to a team to say, hey, this guy's ready to go, instead of this guy showing up or at least saying, hey, I went AWOL because my kid was sick or whatever.
This happened earlier in the year when he skipped a meeting after the loss to the Kansas City Chiefs.
I forgot about that.
You know, instead of just sending it could have been a letter. It could have been, you know, AB shows up with a note signed from AB's mother, kind of like Horseshack.
Yeah.
That's a little before your time.
Yes,
you know, signed Horseshack's mother.
I'm just going to agree with your old-timey references.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, at some point, Antonio Brown has to take responsibility for his own actions. He has not done that. He hasn't done that in quite some time, and perhaps now is the time that it happens. So the question now, Chris, is what will the Steelers do now, right now?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is nothing.
Yeah.
They will wait. They're in no hurry here. Obviously, they're out of the playoffs. They've got more time on their hands this year than they're typically used to having, and they don't rush into any decisions anyway. They're not going to, you know, make an announcement tomorrow that Antonio Brown has been released or Antonio Brown has been traded. They're going to wait this thing out. The only thing that they have, the only time element right now that's involved with this is a $2.5 million roster bonus that's due in mid-March for Antonio Brown. Now, certainly they would like to do something with that, with him before that, but at some point, again, going back to what's Antonio Brown's contrition going to be in this, Drew Rosenhaus has to talk to his client and say, hey man, you were wrong about this. The only problem with that is Antonio Brown is not used to having people tell him
no.
No.
Right. And that's the big thing that you got to look at right now. Antonio Brown, since he's gotten here, and Ryan Clark alluded to this with his statement at ESPN and all that stuff. But Antonio Brown's in a situation where, yeah, he's worked for everything he's got. He's one of the hardest working players in the league. But at the end of the day, you have seen him go through his entire life, and he's gotten everything he's wanted. He's gotten his big money contracts. He's been the man. I mean, he was loved around the city. He signs all the autographs, and now you're in a situation where people have a reason to dislike you, and he has to own up to his mistakes. And when have we ever seen him come out and say, you know, oh, I was wrong? He'll say the Wi-Fi wasn't lit. This isn't a Wi-Fi wasn't lit moment.
No, this is a serious situation. Yeah. He needs to realize that it is and treat it as such. Whether that can happen or not, I don't know. Whether he's too far gone, I don't know. And that's going to be the big question. It's probably going to be answered over the next month.
Yeah, who knows if you know what's going on in his head right now. And that's the thing, is that with him, you can't predict. You know, it's sort of like with the Le'Veon Bell situation. No one predicted that he was coming in. Maybe there's one or two people out there that's like, I knew he wasn't coming in, but the general populace thought that he wasn't coming back, just like the general populace wouldn't have expected this to happen in the last week of the season, and this would be what we're talking about right now.
So, Chris, amidst all the questions about Antonio Brown today, Mike Tomlin did give a glimpse of what he was thinking about in terms of the future of the franchise, including the future of his coaching staff.
He said some changes were coming.
Didn't say what changes were coming, but I think you can expect over the next week or so to see some announcements coming out of the South Side that certain coaches have not been retained.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at, of course, the defensive side of the ball has been talked about all year, and you look at some of the biggest moments, and it's so funny. If they stop Drew Brees on 3rd and 20 against the Saints and they win that game, they're not having this conversation right now. And in fact, they're probably in the playoffs. But you look at that situation and the problems the defense has had. And it's what Mike Tomlin says. When you're not succeeding, you have to change things because stupidity is coming in and doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
And I'll tell you what, I think one of the things that they really need to look at, and I've kind of poo-pooed this in previous years, but this is a situation now where the 3 of their best defensive players, the strength of their defense is the defensive line.
Yeah.
I want to figure out some way, somehow, however it's possible, if that means going to a 4-man front full-time, do it, because you have to keep Javon Hargrave on the football field more than 40% of the time.
Yeah, and that's a serious concern because Javon Hargrave, especially in that late season push that he made, the one game that he really didn't make a huge impact was against the Saints, and that's because he was up against Max Unger. But overall, he has proved very valuable in the middle of the field, and we've seen Tuitt or Hayward can play on the edge as your big edge man, and you can have Watt be your other one. It's certainly something to consider, and especially with the way that they want to develop these hybrid linebackers and use more defensive backs, this would be a way to allow that to grow and sort of help it sort of manifest that in a better way and make it more of a healthy relationship. Because right now, having 3-4 and expecting your sub package safety to play inside linebacker, that's not working. But when you have a 4-man front, less responsibilities to the run, more responsibilities to the pass.